It wasn't too long ago when Iron Mike Tyson looked indestructible in the ring, but now the 56-year-old seems pretty convinced he doesn't have much time left, as he fears the inevitable, saying death will come for him really soon during a recent episode of his popular Hot Boxing with Mike Tyson podcast. In fact, as the podcast got quite philosophical, we're curious to know what's got him thinking about death so deeply. Let's find out. First off, what turned the former boxing champ into a strangely philosophical Tyson? The news got buzz after Mike Tyson invited his therapist, Sean McFarland, on his podcast, where Tyson seemed more concerned about his future, or more specifically, the end. In a much larger discussion with Sean, who specializes in trauma and addiction, Tyson revealed some pretty scary thoughts about his own mortality and other crucial factors such as financial security and how money can really affect a person. In fact, he said some pretty dark stuff as he said that he feels he's inching closer to death. The former heavyweight boxing champ said, "We're all gonna die one day, of course. Then, when I look in the mirror, I see those little spots on my face. I say, wow, that means my expiration date is coming close, really soon." His pretty rare emotional public statement got us thinking if Tyson's just trying to send a warning to all his fans. The strangely philosophical and introspective Tyson series of sad yet concerning statements got his fans fearing for his death. As the 56-year-old takes a look back at his life, he has some advice about what really mattered along the way, or what never did. Moving on, money never really meant anything to Tyson. At least, that's what he said as he continued the conversation about his mortality. Tyson talked about his one constant advice to people, that money's never gonna make them happy. More like a more specific statement about how people think money's gonna make them happy if they've never really had money before. Because when you do have a lot of money, can you really expect someone to love you? Like, who's gonna confess their love to you when you have over $500 billion? Well, that's what Tyson had to say about it. Mike Tyson became world famous back in 1986 when he won boxing's heavyweight title at just 20 years of age. The match was brutal and nerve-wracking as Tyson defeated Trevor Berbick by second-round knockout at the Hilton in Las Vegas. In fact, he went on to fight in some of the sport's biggest bouts, and we're also talking about the legendary fights against Evander Holyfield, Donovan Ruddock, and Lennox Lewis. Having said that, his status as a bona fide box office attraction was only reinforced in 2020 when he made a big comeback to the ring for an exhibition against Roy Jones Jr. And well, now, aged 56, Tyson has some other business interests, and that includes a marijuana farm, some Hollywood movies, and of course, his growing media company on YouTube. In fact, having filed for bankruptcy in 2003, the former boxing champion is now worth an estimated $10 billion. So when he talks about how a lot of money can impact a person, we choose to believe the guy whose experiences taught him enough. Up next, Tyson became philosophical and introspective as he talked about security. He started off with alarming statements about his mortality and continued to money and security. More specifically, the feeling of false security. Tyson talked about how he doesn't really know what security is, focusing on the fact that money in your bank and weekly checks aren't really what he calls security either. If anything, that's a false hope, a false sense of security, because when you have enough money, you think everything can be taken care of. But that's just a myth. Like, you don't believe that the banks could collapse because you just start believing you're invincible with that mountain of cash you're sitting on. As he continued, he also added that while money gives off a false sense of security, his wife doesn't seem to have the same perspective. Despite the countless conversations he's had with his wife, she believes she'd feel more secure if she had more money. And this isn't the first time we've witnessed significant public introspection from Tyson in the last few months, and it's definitely not the first time he's discussed his own inevitable death. During a conference on psychedelics in Miami last year, Tyson confessed that he used Sonoran desert toad venom as a psychedelic drug 53 times during his life. And to say the least, he even claimed that he died during his first trip from the drug. And while it was a silly dare, he continued to talk about how he was his toughest opponent, with a huge ego that buries the low self-esteem. He said the toad stripped his ego and improved his life as it shifted his perspective on the world. Talking about shifting perspectives, Tyson routinely philosophizes on his platform. After his retirement from professional boxing, he was soon diagnosed with bipolar disorder and has mentioned multiple times that he doesn't fear death. Instead, he shifted to a more philosophical view of his life. In fact, he's often talked about his personal life, thoughts, and emotions on his podcast throughout the years. Rewind to an episode in 2020, he cried on his podcast because he felt empty and missed being an annihilator in the ring. And what really scares the fan is when he makes alarming statements like looking forward to death because living seems more of a struggle for him at this point. So we're forced to ask why Tyson feels so lonely and just tired. Moving on to other related news, Tyson also talks about his other biggest fear, violence. Mike Tyson is definitely one of the toughest men in sporting history, and yet But behind his strong and brave facade is a sensitive person who feels more than you think he does. And here's the catch. Despite being the former heavyweight boxing champion and faced fierce and aggressive boxers in the ring, Tyson claims that it's his fear that actually makes him so violent. In fact, he said that he's so violent that he's scared he won't be able to control it. If anything, it's become more of a natural instinct for him, and it definitely is something that's hard for fans to digest, because we see him as the indestructible boxer who doesn't seem to be scared or even the biggest danger in front of him. He's just as sensitive and real as the rest of us. We guess it makes him more relatable to the fans when he reveals stories of his personal struggle and development. Up next, Box Park bouncer Julius Francis excited to take on Mike Tyson rematch. That's right, folks. Julius Francis opened the door to a sensational rematch with Mike Tyson, and that's 22 years after their last fight. Rewind back to January 2000, and Francis and Tyson met for the first time in Iron Mike's 50th professional bout. In just his third time back in the ring after facing disqualification for biting Evander Holyfield, it took Tyson just 4 minutes to dismantle Francis and knock him out in the second round. And the controversial American icon made a comeback to the boxing scene in 2020 for an exhibition fight against Roy Jones Jr. And now Francis is pretty excited for a piece of the action, saying he'd be more than willing for a rematch. In fact, when the topic of a second fight against Tyson was put in front of him in a chat with IFL TV on YouTube, he said he kept the door open to a prospective bout. And finally, Mike Tyson was absolutely humbled returning to Albany, where his pro boxing career began. When Tyson laced up his boxing gloves for the very first time in 1985 as a professional boxer at the Empire State Plaza Convention Center in Albany, he knew what that moment really meant. Even at the age of 18, Tyson knew the importance of the sport and what he needed to achieve. Tyson said he wanted to be there, and he wanted to be absolutely spectacular because it was the most intense moment of his life, his very first fight. So by all means, it just had to be spectacular. And wearing white trunks instead of the traditional black ones went on to become his trademark. And to say the least, Tyson knocked out Hector Mercedes in just 1 minute and 47 seconds into his pro debut with absolutely savage body punches, leaving Mercedes in a corner. And so began his dynamic, fearsome, and publicized careers. Having said that, looking grandfatherly with a white beard, Tyson said it feels very humbling and happy to be here. All his childhood friends are now grandfathers. He's definitely had his share of depressing lows and exhilarating highs during his entire career, with 50 victories, including 37 consecutive ones with an added 44 knockouts. He's had a pretty successful career, and that's truly why we still see him as an icon. That's a wrap for this video. What do you think about Mike Tyson's recent statement? Let us know in the comments below. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this. See you in the next one.